All right, we are live right now.
Hey, Kathy, do you want to present or do you want me to present or jump in or how do you want to?
Nope, you go ahead, and if there's questions or whatever I need help with, just let me know as you go along the way.
Okay. I'm just using your stuff anyway, so.
Okay. Now that you say that, I'm gonna go.
Pull it up.
How's Shelley?
I don't see Shelley.
Scroll down.
There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Oops.
Sounds good.
Hey,
Everything's live
sorry,
and ready to go.
Okay, thank you. I was having trouble getting Zoom to load today, so sorry for the delay. Very good, let's get started. I call into session this regular school board business meeting, the special school board business meeting of Stillwater Area Public Schools on June 23rd, 2020. Due to the current federal and state emergency guidelines, Minnesota directive to residents to stay safe and stay home, limiting person-to-person contact due to the coronavirus pandemic. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota statutes 13D.021, meetings by telephone or other electronic means. The board has determined that it is not feasible for at least one board member, the superintendent, or the district's legal counsel to be physically present at the regular meeting location, and that it is not feasible for the public to attend this meeting at the regular location due to the pandemic. Persons may monitor this meeting via live stream on YouTube through a link on the district website. School board members wishing to speak have been asked to raise their hand and wait to be recognized. All votes will be conducted by roll call. Each school board member should wait until their name is called before voting and indicate saying yes or no clearly and using a thumbs up for a yes. This meeting is being recorded. Access to the recording will be made available on the district's website as soon as possible. And welcome. Sherry, could we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Stivland?
Here.
Vice Chair Pearson?
Here.
Treasurer Reilly?
Here.
Clerk Potachik?
Here.
Director Burns?
Here.
Director Pelletier?
Here.
Director Weisberg?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
We
Second.
have a motion by Director Weisberg and a second by Director Reilly. All in favor of approving the agenda, we need a roll call again. Sherry?
Director Burns?
Yes.
Director Pearson?
Yes.
Director Pelletier?
Yes.
Director Potachik?
Yes.
Director Reilly?
Yes.
Director Weisberg?
Yes.
Chair Stivland?
Yes.
You have a quorum?
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So the purpose of our meeting, special meeting today, is to discuss and define the process for hiring a new superintendent and for hiring a new assistant superintendent. I think that what would be best is if we talk about the superintendent first, because I think the assistant superintendent position is going to be a little bit more involved. So, board members, I sent out a notification with a suggestion that I would like for us to discuss to start out with. That we consider hiring an interim superintendent for the short period, and that we go through a process where we define a way for us to select a search firm to help us hiring a permanent superintendent position. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that before we keep going? Okay. So as I indicated earlier this week, I have recommended, hold on one second. As you know, we need to have a superintendent in place by July 2nd. We are interested in having someone who knows our history, loves our community, and understands the dynamics and goals we've been working on. We need someone who is passionate, talented, a problem solver, a strong communicator, and someone who will help our district move forward together. We want someone who has experience doing district level work, strong support from district leadership teams, and who will transition smoothly into the role. We have all of that and more with an individual that I would like to recommend for discussion and ask for your approval tonight. As I sent to you in an email earlier, my recommendation is that we hire Melinda Lansfeld as our interim superintendent. And then we can discuss what the process should look like for hiring a permanent superintendent. So I would like to make a motion at this time that as part of this process for hiring a superintendent, that we offer a position to Melinda Lansfeld of interim superintendent beginning July 2nd, 2020 for a period of up to 1 year, or until the district hires a permanent superintendent, whichever occurs first. And that such offer is conditioned on reaching an agreement on the terms of the employment contract, and that the board chair and board clerk Mike Potachik is authorized to negotiate the terms of an employment contract, of a possible employment contract with Ms. Lansfeld, subject to board approval. Can I get a second, please, for the motion?
Second.
Director Potachik. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'd like to hear from you. Director Pelletier?
Thank you, Chair. Can you explain to me what the process was for this decision? And was this posted? And then, so third, what was the process? 2, was it posted? And 3, I guess, are we under a statutory obligation to have this position filled by July 1? So those are 3 questions I had.
Good questions. We are under obligation. There are laws that say we have to have a superintendent on staff in order to have an active district. It's unclear what kind of ramifications there would be if we didn't, but I suppose something could be tied to funding. I think that would be something we could look into. But certainly we do need to have a superintendent on staff at all times. That's the goal. This was not posted. This was not posted. And this is just simply my reaching out to our legal counsel and asking what the potential process could look like and how has it worked in the past. And the information that I gathered was that this is something that has been done similarly in the past. Director Potachik?
Yes, and I just want to add to that a little bit, and perhaps Kathy can as well, because she's been here. But in the 12 years I've been on the board, this has happened twice with an interim. In both situations, we hired Tom Nelson. And the first time Tom was hired, the person who was sent out to get candidates or find candidates, so to speak, was George Hepner. And George came back and he had several candidates, but he had already made a selection on what he thought the rest of the board should do. And he took a little bit, not a lot, a little bit of heat on that. But we went with his suggestion and we're very, very pleased with it. The second time that came up, and that was after Corey Lund signed a contract in Iowa, we did something similar, but the board was very experienced with Tom Nelson, and Tom was available. And I don't remember, Kathy, maybe you remember who was superintendent. It was probably George again, or probably Tom Lehman.
Chair, it was George, I believe.
Yeah, so in both situations. But what I would say in terms of an intern, in my experience in the district, that's a pretty short timeline. And generally it's been, you call an agency like MSA, the School Boards Association or AMSD, and you say, well, who's out there? And typically it's a retiree. I personally, and that's why I seconded the motion. I've known Melinda Lansfeld. I think she's been here in Stillwater as long as I have, if not longer. And she's held a number of different hats. And I think personally that she's a very, very strong candidate.
Thank you. Director Reilly?
Is it normal to do the process this fast without allowing any input from board members or an opportunity to speak to the candidate?
Yeah, I would.
I think that,
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would. Tina, what I would say in both cases, I never met Tom Nelson before he was hired the first time. The second time, obviously, most board members had worked with him. Not all, but most. And I don't think there was an opportunity. But again, it was for an interim. It wasn't for a superintendent who was going to sign a contract for longer periods of time. Maybe Kathy has some experience on that.
Well, Mark has his hand up, so we'll go to Mark first. Director Burns?
Oh, thanks. And I think this is just a follow-up, Director Potacek, and maybe Kathy, you can weigh in as well. Was there a like a committee at all assigned to review in the first go round for Tom Nelson to review, or was it just simply George himself? It's a question. Director Potacek, if
Director Potacek?
From my memory, it was just George.
I don't recall the committee being formed either, Mark.
And then I guess
I will just say, I'll just jump in and then I'll let you keep going there. In my opinion, this process is not how I would describe as being an ideal process, but I do feel that we're in a situation where time is really very tight. And so we need to have someone who can jump in and who knows our district really well and knows all of the every inch of the district and knows all of the dynamics and the goals that we've been working on and can just step in and provide some continuity. And so that's why I feel like having an internal candidate is the best choice. And then I think Melinda is just an outstanding leader in her own right. So that's the thought process for me anyways. Go ahead, Director Burns.
well, I guess my follow-up was there any type of board interview of Tom Nelson the first time around, 2014? It was just a contract was presented to.
Yeah, and as I remember, Mark, what stood out on that, when George had talked to one other candidate before, and then he talked to Tom Nelson, and the first candidate, when he found out he had talked to Tom Nelson, said, he's out of my league. He's way better than I am. So he'd be foolish not to take him. And so that candidate withdrew. But no, I had never met him. I never crossed his path before that. And I think that's
Dr. Reilly?
Of the other board members.
Sorry.
How long has this been in the works that would have maybe given us an opportunity to reach out and ask questions?
Not very long. There really hasn't been an opportunity to ask questions before now. Just been about a week. Director Pelletier?
First of all, my opinions about the candidate are completely separate. I think she's a remarkable person. So that aside, I'm very concerned about even the fact that we're leaving a vacancy in a building with almost zero time before the school starts. And I'm wondering, to what capacity has that been vetted in the short amount of time that we're seeing this? We just got the application a couple hours ago. So where was that discussion?
Well, obviously that is obviously something that we need to consider, and we would need to have a position. We need to have that position filled. Director Reilly?
Timeline, how long is this position supposed to continue?
In talking with the search companies that I have gathered, just some really basic information, the process can take 4 to 5 months to hire a permanent superintendent. Being that puts us in the middle of a school year, I think that is a little bit of a unique situation. Questioning whether or not a really high quality candidate would want to leave a current position in the middle of a year in order to come here. So it may be that, it may be that we'll have a hiring date for a permanent position as of, next July. But I think it's just an unknown. It just depends on, who is out there and who's interested in coming here and what the timing is. But in terms of the actual process, they're saying it takes, 4 to 5 months. Director Pearson?
Thank you. And I think Tom Nelson was here for 1 year, a full year, both times that he was here. I would say that normally I would really want to, get several candidates and be able to meet with them and talk with them. But I did ask Kathy about this, and so one, I believe that it probably is in the best interest of the district to have somebody who already knows the district. And I asked about internal candidates, and I think our pool is quite small for those who have a superintendent's license. So it's not that we have a whole bunch of people that we can choose from. I think because Melinda she's already worked in the district office. She serves as a principal, has worked really closely with everything that's gone on with distance learning planning and all the other things, that it probably is what's best for us at this time.
Director Weisberg.
Thank you. I completely agree. I think it would put a lot of people's minds at ease to have somebody that they already know. There are a lot of big vacant positions, and I think that this would be the absolute smoothest transition. And if we want to go ahead and vote, I'm thrilled that Melinda would consider it.
Director Pelletier?
Again, what's the plan for the school for Afton Lakeland? I'm very concerned about that. And what about the financial implications of that? Have we discussed have you discussed, who is discussing any of that component? Has the salary structure been discussed yet?
Okay. So I can quickly answer a couple of those questions right away. No salary structure has been discussed yet at all. But I did talk with her directly about the idea of, she feels very strongly about her building. She's very, very proud and loyal to her building and to the people that work in that building. And she wants it to make sure that it's taken really good care of. And so she cares, obviously, that whoever is running the building in her absence will do a really good job. We talked about the possibility of an internal candidate, someone that is also within the district who might be able to step into the role. There are some pros and cons to that as well. If we did that, then we would have kind of a domino effect, because then we'd have another position to fill. So that has its own challenges, but having someone coming from outside the district might also be an option. But of course, then they're not as familiar with our system and with, you know, with our goals and our culture, and it would be a little bit of a learning curve there. So pros and cons both ways, that all would need to be worked out for sure. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope, I don't have anything unless somebody has questions for
Oh,
me.
okay. I thought I saw you take your speaker off, so you look like
Oh.
you were ready to jump in.
Nope.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's go to Shelley and then Director Reilly.
Thank you, because I think that's a good question, Director Pelletier. And I do think, Kathy, you can answer this question. We do have a little bit bigger pool of teachers, I think, who have a principal's license. Is that correct?
We do have some teachers that have principal's license within the district. And I think we would want to look at how long you want this to be. If it's going to be for a partial year, my approach would definitely be different than if it was going to be for a full year, because putting someone in for a partial year from the teacher unit and filling behind them, you now have an extra teacher at the end if you decided to put the dominoes back. So that how we did it would depend on what you decide as far as length.
And so if it is shorter, the option is a long-term sub in that class if we went with a teacher, right?
Right, or we do an interim for the principal that's for a shorter period of time and go external.
Okay, thank you.
Director Reilly?
I'm a little concerned of the process that just played out. Being that we're kind of focusing on processes right now and trying to clean up the way we go about our business. I think a week would have given us some time to be able to have those conversations with Melinda. She does have a very long history here, and this district's been through quite a bit, and she's been part of those things. And I would have really appreciated the opportunity to reach out to her and have some discussion with her prior than just 2 hours before the board meeting today. I felt it was a little sprung on me, and I thought we were kind of trying to avoid those circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Director Pearson?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Director Reilly. I think, do I understand correctly that we still will vote on the contract? So that will still give opportunity for board members to reach out and have discussions, correct? Before we vote on the contract.
Right, and I just want to clarify too that my bringing this to this meeting tonight in this way was an attempt to save us from having another special meeting before July 1st. I think I indicated that in the email that I sent to the board, that if you would like to have more time and would like to meet with her before we actually vote, that would be a possibility. My hope was that we would be able to have this motion tonight and finalize a process and be able to vote on it on Thursday. I understand that is really, really fast. And so I'm very sensitive. I'm aware of that. I'm sensitive to that. So if you guys would like to slow down and take a little bit more time and have time to consider this, absolutely, totally am fine with that. It just means that we're going to have a special meeting because we don't have another board meeting scheduled until July, I think, 9th. So that would be after this. Director Potacek?
Yes, sir, would you read the motion again? Because I think some people have asked questions on parts of it, like the negotiation and the length of time.
Okay. Yes, so the motion was written by our legal counsel, and I think she was trying to get both pieces in one motion to make it simpler. We certainly could separate them out if you want to. The motion is to that the board would offer Melinda Lansfeld the position of interim superintendent beginning July 2nd for a period of up to 1 year, or until the district hires a permanent superintendent, whichever occurs first, and that such offer is conditioned on reaching an agreement on the terms of an employment contract. And the second part is that the board chair and the board clerk are authorized to negotiate the terms of a possible employment contract with Ms. Lansfeld, subject to board approval. So this would just be the first step towards moving towards a contract with her. We would negotiate a contract, establish the terms, and bring that back to the board for final approval. So you would all get a chance to see the contract and weigh in on it at that time, and then we would vote on it. Does that help? Director Burns?
Thanks. I think I understand the motion now. So the long and short of it is that we're being asked to approve this hire, kind of subject to the terms, that then we would then approve those terms, or be asked to approve those terms as early as the day after tomorrow, right? The Thursday meeting.
Right, right. And we need to authorize someone to be a part of the negotiating team, because we can't all be a part of that. You know, we all 7 of us can't be a part of that. So we would need to have somebody represent the board and negotiate the terms. I mean, it could be anybody really, but, and then bring that back to the board for approval.
And I guess
Go ahead.
I'll echo Director Reilly's comments that, you know, I think one of the challenges that I have with some of these action items is that they're just brought to us, and we have to vote up or down, and it's difficult because I don't have anything against the candidate. My experience with Melinda has been positive, and so I don't have anything against the candidate. It's more the process that this is a very obviously important position for the district, and this position may be filled for a year, up to a year, and there will be a lot of important decisions that will be made by our superintendent during that time, our interim superintendent. So it's just it's difficult for me at least to move and say yes, given really no preparation for it.
Director Pelletier?
Thank you, Chair. I'm also in agreement with Director Burns as well as Director Reilly. I think I'm thankful for your comments, Director Reilly, because it's exactly what's in my mind. In the spirit of improving our processes, we're asked to vote on something that we receive a couple hours prior to this, and with no true discussion. And I also just don't feel that it's fair to the applicant. I think it puts the applicant in a tough position as well. And I don't think that's a good thing either. And, I think this person is just fantastic, but I don't think the process was, just because it's been done before for me is just not enough of a reason. And for me, the impact on the building itself remains a question mark. I don't know. We don't know how long this is going to be for. We don't know the budgetary parameters of this. We don't know what the situation is at the school. And again, for me, it's all about the kids and how our kids, I mean, we just have so much unknown. So appreciate the comments. I just would feel much better about just giving this a little bit of a pause.
Could you describe what you mean by pause?
Thanks. For me, I guess I'd rather know what the process is, who created, I saw the words here that, this is what we're looking for. I just don't remember myself weighing in on what we're looking for or any kind of a discussion in that capacity. I remain just concerned about the health of the school, given the the learning situations and challenges that we're going to have to face, and stability. And then just in general, process wise, I have concern over the process, and it's just not good enough for me to hear we've done it before. That doesn't really fly with me. So
go ahead, Director Pearson.
Thank you. I think I agree. It could have been done probably differently. I think the challenge is on July 1, we have to have somebody in, which is a week from tomorrow. So if there's another way to do it, I think we can talk about it. But I don't know what it would be in order to get somebody ready to transition from one position to a new position. I think that's the challenge, part of the challenge.
Shelley, is there a statute or something that states this?
We are required, I don't
Yeah.
know what statute it is, but we are required to have, maybe Kathy knows it, we're required to have a superintendent with a superintendent's license.
You're on mute, Kathy.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Shelley's correct. We are required by statute to employ a superintendent. And there should be one always on staff, so you would need somebody on July 1. I just don't know the specific statute, Jen.
I guess, I mean, the vote just happened, a week ago, and I guess I struggle with 2 weeks time, I struggle with all of that, just because there's a statute as such that apparently, there's no wiggle room for a vote that happened 2 weeks prior, and then we got to put someone in. That just seems really flawed to me.
Well, I think the initial plan was to have the assistant superintendent process complete before July 1. I think that was the initial hope, was to be able to have an assistant superintendent who would have a superintendent's license completed, so that that person would be able to serve in that role until we were able to get a superintendent. So, but as it turns out, that process is going to take just a little bit longer than we had hoped. And so it's just a matter of a few days or maybe a week or two that we're going to be, really needing to have this covered. So the other thing I was going to say about your comments in terms of identifying what we're looking for, I mean, I'm incredibly thankful that Melinda Lansfeld is willing to step into this role and give it her whole entire heart and soul and mind and body, because it's not an easy job and she's willing to do it. I'm incredibly thankful for that. And this isn't going to be the permanent superintendent. We're going to go through a search process that's going to probably drive us all a little bit crazy with the amount of details and thoughtfulness that we're going to put into it. We're going to have a company that will come in and facilitate that process for us. We will be given an opportunity to define exactly what we're looking for in a long-term superintendent. And so, we will have those opportunities. This is just literally an interim position for right now. And so we don't have the luxury of time, really. Director Pearson?
Thank you. And just an FYI, Director Pelletier, I think the statute is 123B.143. That says all districts maintaining a classified secondary school must employ a superintendent. I think is the one.
That sounds right. I think when I talked about this with legal counsel, she made the point that it's not clear what the sort of ramifications of not following that statute are, that it's not clear, what happens if you don't, but it's certainly not something you really want to take the risk. It could involve some funding or something like that.
I guess I just think from if you're from a rational, pragmatic side, if there were a catastrophe that happened with your superintendent 5 days before the end of the month, I guess I'm just trying to say that, things happen. And I just don't imagine that, they're going to slap down some incredible fine or what have you, withhold funding for us trying to do our due diligence.
Well, I guess then the question would be, if you said earlier you want to take a pause, what do you want to have happen in the pause? What would you if you're not comfortable with this process, how would you make it better? What would you like to see different?
I would love to have a full board discussion on what we want together as a process. I guess for me, I would honestly like to hear from my fellow board members to say, what is your vision? I would love to hear from every board member to say, what's your vision of what a good process would be? That I would personally really like that. And again, I'm gonna take a gamble and know that this candidate knows how I feel about her. But for me, it's, you know, I'm still just very concerned about the school, and I feel like we don't have, you know, any kind of answers. I don't know. I just 2 hours before the
What would
meeting.
it take for you to feel comfortable with this situation?
I want to know what is going to happen at Afton Lakeland, and not just a casual, we're going to put someone in the spot. I'm very concerned about the kids at the school. I want to know, given the lack of senior admin right now, that this rests on our building leaders at every single building. And I'm so concerned about the kids, and I just can't, I need to know how our kids are going to be handled. I need to feel good about that, and I need to feel that there's or some sort of a procedure in place. That's my biggest concern. Completely void of my personal feelings about the candidate.
That's fair. Director Burns?
And I think Chair Stivlin, I think for me, what would I have liked to have seen is to have this time spent on developing, as Director Pelletier said, what is it that we want? What are we looking for? Do we want an internal candidate? Does that make sense? And come to a consensus on the board as to what would work well, and then move from there. That just, it feels like a better process. I recognize what we believe to be a timing constraint, but in part that's kind of self-induced. But if I feel like this is the time when we can have this discussion, and then we can come to an approach of how we then move forward. That's I think what would make me feel good about.
Yeah, we certainly can talk more about that right now. Absolutely. Director Potacek.
Yes, a number of things. Excuse me. One is that I think we are very, very fortunate to have a very well qualified candidate right now to assume the position. And I don't think you can ignore that part. I think earlier we asked the question is we said, okay, what's been done in the past? And we've had two relatively recent events in the past 10 years and how it was done. I don't know the answer to the other. How have other districts dealt with interims? But it wasn't that long ago, perhaps 2-3 weeks ago, that we were talking about filling the assistant superintendent position. And the question came up, should we put it out as a regular or should we put it out as an interim? And we decided not to go with the interim. And the argument was, you're going to get a different type of candidate for an interim than you are for long term. When you talk about a process and the board talking about the characteristics they would like to see, we're going to do that, but not for this position. And the difference is this position you want to fill because you have a necessity to fill as soon as possible. But if the pool was small for assistant superintendents and we got 16, perhaps it's even smaller for permanent superintendents, or rather for interim superintendents.
Director Pearson?
Thank you. Well, and we're not moving forward with the superintendent hiring, right? This is the interim for however long we need it, right? So a short amount of time. And I think, you know, could we talk about maybe if we want to do the process differently, we maybe could talk to Melinda about filling in until we do something else. But I think would it be better for continuity's sake to have her in and then bring in the permanent? Might that be better for us? As far as filling the need at that building, I agree. I also believe that we have really talented people who have principals licenses that could step into that building and do a really great job there. So I have less concern about that. I think that either we'll get an external candidate that's really good or an internal candidate that's really good. And I think we need continuity. So we can talk about, do we want to do the process differently? We have to have somebody in place next Wednesday. I'm not willing to break the law if we don't have to. So I think we need to have somebody in there. I think Melinda is willing, and she's been in the district and she has done well. So I don't know where we go from there, but I think that building will be well taken care of, and that, you know, maybe we want to talk about now, do we think internal is best, which I've shared my opinion already, that I think we need somebody who has been here and knows the system and knows what's been going on the past several months and what we're planning with distance learning, and who has built a lot of relationships that are positive in the district.
Director Potacek?
Yes, and just underline that point, all of you have a copy of her resume, and she's been a principal in this district and other administrative positions for 13 years. That's a pretty long time. Plus, personally, I think that she's extremely well regarded by her peers.
Yeah.
As well as her staffs.
Director Weisberg?
I agree with everybody. And I know there are a lot of concerns, but I think we are in a time constraint. And I think we're extremely lucky to have somebody like Melinda in our district who is very qualified and is also willing to help. And I think that an interim needs somebody who can be a good bridge. And I think she would be an excellent bridge. She knows our district. People know her. And I think we have a motion and a second. So I would just wonder at this time, could we go ahead and vote on the motion as it is? Or if somebody wants to amend it, go from there.
Director Pelletier?
I could feel better about it without, I feel like we're sitting at the table pondering what we think we know, as opposed to having any concrete information or data to, you know, I would love to know, okay, so here's the action plan, or here's what is going to actually happen at Afton Lakeland versus, you know, just, we know all these things, but this is a conversation amongst us of our opinion. You know, my opinion is she's great, but I guess for me, you know, we're elected to, you know, to use information, and this is void of all information. This is void of what the plan is at Afton Lakeland, how long we're foreseeing the term to be, what the dollar amount is, what admin, you know, that's a key component of it too. Have we had any discussions, you know, who has had discussions in that regard? And I guess those are things that you know, what if we were to amend it to get some information on a plan, you know, what is the plan at Afton Lakeland in the fall? That is honestly, you know, regardless of, we've got great people here. I would amend it. I would be willing to have a follow-up discussion and a brief special meeting or whatever we need to do in a week, to just so I can feel better about this vote.
Okay, I think that's really all really good points. And I agree with you that some clarity about what will happen in her building is a good thing for us to explore and get a little bit more information. And I just want to remind you, this is the beginning, like there's a two-step process here. This is just the beginning that says, yes, as a board member, you are okay with exploring this as a possibility. We will go ahead and negotiate a contract. We will answer the questions that you're raising tonight, and we can come back to the board and say, here's the information we found, and here's the contract that we're proposing. If it doesn't work, because you don't like the contract or because you don't like the circumstances of what it will do, then we can go back to the drawing board and do something different. We're not absolutely deciding for sure right now. We're deciding subject that all of the contingencies would be met.
But that's negating your previous words from earlier that say we have this deadline. So wouldn't it be
Yeah, we do
better
have a
to get-
deadline.
Right.
We do have a
we're-
deadline.
Okay, but so we take this step and then we come back in the contract. If we don't like it, then we say no, and then we're 2 days from the deadline. I mean, I just.
Well, it sounds like you want to make sure that the leadership at the Afton Lakeland building is going to be secure. So if we can answer that question and to, make it clear that it will be secure, that we have a plan for that, then would that make it easier for you to support this? If you that's what I'm hearing you say, is that you want to make sure that Afton Lakeland is going to be okay. Director Burns?
This is just a suggestion. If we were to table this motion to Thursday and then vote on this motion, there may be enough time between now and Thursday to answer some of those questions. And if any other board members have questions, and yes, it would require us to have a special meeting, but we could do that if the board does approve. I think, and just to let you know, if we were going to vote on this tonight, I'm not going to vote no, but I don't think I'm in a position to vote yes either. I want to feel more comfortable with this process, and I'm just wondering if we tabled it to Thursday, we would have to call a special meeting for next week, but it could be a very brief one, and that would just be to approve the contract.
So the question I would have is, if we table and we bring this back up for Thursday, and the same motion we bring up on Thursday, then we would have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we would have to have the special meeting on Monday, June 29th or Tuesday, June 30th. So that's, it's not a lot of time. And the question would be, what would you want to accomplish in that amount of time? What would you hope to achieve? Because we want to make sure that can get done.
I'm just Director Pelletier's concerns about what we do with Afton Lakeland and staffing there. Okay.
Director, I don't know who had their hand up first. Director Pearson?
Thank you. I was going to start writing down the questions that we have. Is that the only question that really remains? And if so, Kathy, maybe you can answer. It's not even possible to have somebody in place in 2 days, is it? Or in 5 days?
In place for which position are you speaking?
Principal at Afton Lakeland. Don't you have to post it and have a posting period and everything?
Yes, there's a process we would go through under the principal contract to post positions. The piece that I would say is, remember, Melinda is here. And so she is still in the district and still could help oversee Afton. So it wouldn't be floating out there unattended. She's going to have lots of duties under the superintendent, but she's still here. And so she's got that knowledge and will still be in the meetings and the prepping for all of the planning for the upcoming school year until such time somebody is there.
Director Pearson?
Just as a follow-up, so thank you for that, Kathy. So I think that question can't be answered by next Wednesday, but are there other questions that people still have that also they would feel better if they're answered.
Go ahead, Jen. Dr. Pelzer?
Thanks. It's not, this isn't really indicative to this particular moment, but why was this position not posted? I guess Kathy, maybe that's for you. I mean, I just am wondering why.
For superintendent, Jen?
Yeah, just for this one, I'm just wondering why this wasn't posted.
I have not been asked to post superintendent. I have been working on the assistant superintendent position, so I have not done any action on superintendent until I had board direction.
For me, okay, thanks, Kath. For me, the sticking point is honestly just the students' well-being at the school. I'm aware that we're not going to say, here's the person we have that we're going to have in the position. I mean, I'm well aware of that, but I just want to feel good that some form of stability is in place, a discussion, a conversation. I mean, honestly, it's 2 hours before this vote, and I just don't, for me, it's worth just having that sense of calm that that we're being heard with that, and this is taken seriously and with vigor. I don't have any issue supporting the position. It's just that the process, I think, was really troublesome. And again, I'll just say it for the 10th time, that just the student factor. And I can't imagine that we can't in a couple days time get just some more clarity as to what the school situation is going to look like.
Director Reilly?
So Melinda has experience wearing many, many hats in this district, and she has juggled multiple schools at a time. So that is not a very big concern to me. I guess I am wondering if we find somebody mid-year, perhaps, then what? I mean, and then what, how does she, get back into the district, or where is she going to be at after this position is done?
I can tell you that at this time, she's indicated she wants to go right back to Afton Lakeland. She wants to have her position back.
So
this is literally a temporary fill-in position.
So the principal position would be temporary, or?
I think so, yeah. That's
See,
correct.
I think that would be good for the board members to know, like, the plan, and it really helps with the decision making, because we don't know. I mean, you guys have been involved in conversations, and we don't have the background knowledge that you're carrying. So I think that's all that we're looking for.
Director Potacek?
Yes, Kathy, do you have in your head, and I don't want to put you on the spot, any idea of how many potential people there are with elementary principals licenses that might have an interest here? Is it like 4 or 5 or more than that?
No, I believe there's more than 4 or 5. I don't know that number. If I could just offer a perspective as far as this process for a long-term superintendent, by going out in the middle of the year and recruiting for a permanent superintendent, I am concerned that you are going to get a different pool, because superintendents who are in positions are not going to likely get up and apply for another position in the middle of their contract, in the middle of a school year. And so I guess from my perspective, and as Sarah said, it takes a long time to go through a process to hire a superintendent. You would be in a better position, and as far as transitioning people back to roles, if you had a person for a year.
Director Weisberg?
That's what the motion said, right? It said for up to a year.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
That is correct. Director Pearson?
Thank you. Yeah, it said up to a year, and I think I agree with what Kathy's saying, that we probably want that person for a year, and maybe that's getting into the next conversation a little bit, that we'll talk about that as part of our process. I think my question still remains. I am 100% certain that Afton Lakeland will be covered. We won't know names or anything if we have a special meeting. So I'm fine tabling it. I just don't know what information are we going to have that we don't already have. That we know the building will be covered. We know Melinda can help, but also I don't want her having to do that if she doesn't have to. But there's also people, I think, who will be ready to step into that position or be hired into that position if we know that it's a 1-year commitment.
Director Weisberg?
It seems like tabling it, we're probably going to come up with the same solution anyway. I think everybody has, while the process isn't even close to 100% perfect, it seems like everybody is very thrilled that we're lucky enough to have Melinda, who has said she would be willing to serve and is very well qualified. So if somebody does want to table it, don't we need an official motion? And if we don't have that, can we go ahead and vote?
I just want to respect all the comments that and the conversation that we're having. I really appreciate the dialogue. I do wish that we could have had a little bit more time. Unfortunately, this is just how it ended up being. We don't always have a lot of control over how the timing works. I do understand some of the concerns. I appreciate that, but I also feel incredibly grateful that we have such an incredible candidate who is willing to step in and help us and help our district right now. Director Pelletier?
I just want to state that a board that prides itself on process and not rushing and giving everyone the opportunity to think through things and to ask questions prior to an action item like this is just the absolute antithesis of that. And I'm just baffled by it. And, you know, and I feel like I don't like how I feel like we're putting, you know, this is not a criticism of the candidate. The candidate is wonderful, but this is, I just really have a bad feeling about how this whole thing was put together.
Director Pearson?
Thank you. So Director Pelletier, to that point, what can be done to salvage that for you? Is there anything that can be done to salvage that for you?
I would have liked to have known what kind of process we could have had. We haven't had any work sessions on any of this kind of thing. I'd like to hear from the board members what kind of process we want as we make these decisions. I want to know what the impact is on the school, and just us saying I'm 100% confident is just not enough for me, Shelley. Respectfully speaking, I want that concrete evidence that you know, we're just in such a critical time with this pandemic, and the thought that the school could be left without a leader with us just pontificating that we think it's okay is just, it's scary to me. So I guess, you know, this is going to fail, and that's okay, but I will just do this so we can move along, move the dime to Liz's comment. I would like to move to table to have the questions answered that I think I brought up, Director Reilly maybe brought up in some capacity, as well as Director Burns. Just move to table this, and so we can have a little bit more clarity on this. And then I'm willing to have a quick vote on it. In general, I support the candidate. It's not about the candidate for me. It's about the process, and I want to ensure that the school is going to be well taken care of in the fall. And I just want some clarity on that. I need to feel good about that. So I'm just going to make the motion, move to table in that regard.
Is there a second?
Question?
We have a motion to table. Is there a second?
A question on the
Director
motion,
Patch?
please. How long do you anticipate the table to be? Is that till the next meeting or a special meeting or a week, a month?
Mike, I'm just wondering if we can't have some conversations internally, you know, if maybe perhaps who's left, Kathy can have some discussions with other admin as well on how the building structure is going to look. You know, whomever it is, you know, perhaps there can be a quick admin discussion to say, okay, this is how we're going to take care of the school. I don't foresee that needs to take a really long time. I would really appreciate just having some form of clarity on that. Whatever's rational. I mean, Mike, if it's a couple of days and then we have a quick vote next week, you know, Kathy, I don't know. Do you think that you can have any kind of information, at least some form of conversation with some of the other admin within the next 4 days?
There's not many admin here for me to talk to. So what I could share with you, Jen, though, as far as what I would foresee as a process, and I don't know that this will change, it helps for me to know whether it's going to be a long-term or short-term. If we're talking a year versus a short-term, that has a difference in what my approach would be in filling that spot. So I would want to know that answer before I laid out a process. Having said that, I would also suggest to you that given where we are with the planning for the upcoming school year and needing somebody that is going to be helping to implement changes in programming and deciding what is the best educational program that we need for our kids, and is this a hybrid program or is this some combination, and how do you train staff and implement it? This is probably not the time for you to bring in a person internally who has never been a principal, because your principals who are trying to get everybody ready for the upcoming school year are then trying to help someone else learn just how to be a principal, and then also how to get the school and the staff ready for the upcoming school year. So my suggestion to you is you probably want an experienced principal that could come in and take over the school for that. I'm going to assume a year if Melinda were in for a 1-year interim, which would mean posting. And either way, you're going to post the position. It just depends on which approach you take as to hiring once you've done that. Does that help, or does that answer the question?
So I think we need a second before we
We
continue.
need a
talking
second
about-
for the table. We have a motion. Yes, thank you, Director Pearson. We have a motion to table the motion. So can we get a second?
Well, then yeah, I'll second it for the purposes of,
Okay, Director Burns is seconding the table. All right, and then I saw Director Reilly and Director Pearson. I'll go with you. Director Pearson?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Director Reilly. So I
Your
just,
hand was still up, so.
oh, sorry. I would like to amend the motion to have a time that we would table until Thursday. That's my amendment.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Director Reilly?
No, I just wanted Kathy to elaborate, if you could, a little bit on the process or the approach when it's appropriate to do so. It doesn't have to be right now.
Would it be helpful for us to say that we do want to have a special meeting, another special meeting, like next Monday or Tuesday? And in the meantime, each of us can take the time to maybe talk with Melinda and get some of our questions answered, talk with whoever you want to talk with, and allow us to have some feedback. Now that this is a public conversation, this is a public conversation. This is out there now. So maybe we'll be getting some feedback from people to hear whether this is supported by our community. If we give it more time and just have until Monday or Tuesday to decide, is that helpful? I'm not sure. Director Pearson?
Thank you. But don't we need to make the decision to move forward toward contract negotiations with her? So that special meeting needs to be approving the contract. We would need another decision that would either
Right.
happen today or on Thursday. So I'm just not comfortable with
that's right.
leaving it really open-ended. I think because we have two decisions that need to be made. So however
I
that
agree.
plays out, I think we need to be cognizant of.
Yeah. Director Reilly?
So I will vote no to all the motions, just for the fact that I think you need to get working on the contract and get it done. And there may be some back and forth, and that's going to be probably a little time intensive. You know, I'm not happy about the process and how this was laid out. I'm not happy that I wasn't able to secure those conversations ahead of time. I will be able to have those conversations before I make my final vote, but I think we really need to get the ball moving.
Director Weisberg?
Shelley's amendment need a second, or can we vote on Jen's tabling?
Yep, we need a second on the amendment.
Well, or if it doesn't get an amendment, then the tabling is just indefinite.
Right, so the amendment,
I'll
the motion
second.
to amend is to
Seconded.
amend to specific to Thursday. Now we have a second for that amendment. Is there any further discussion about the idea of the amendment being that we table this topic until this coming Thursday? That means we would add it to our agenda of our regular board meeting on Thursday. Any other questions or comments or thoughts about that? All right, can we vote on the amendment? Okay, it looks like we're ready to, Director Potacek? You're muted, we can't hear you.
No, I'm not muted.
There you
There
are.
we go, now we can hear you.
All right.
Go ahead.
The question I have is this, are we voting first on whether it's going to be Thursday? And then we're voting on
amendment.
the tabling? And
Yes.
then the original motion?
Right.
Okay.
So what we're voting on now is whether we should table to Thursday. The amendment is to bring it up at the meeting on Thursday. Is everybody clear? Okay, Sherry, can we do a roll call vote for the amendment?
Director Burns,
Yes.
Director Pearson,
Yes.
Director Pelletier,
Yes.
Director Potacek,
I'll go with yes.
Director Reilly,
No.
Director Weisberg, Chair Stivland,
Yes.
you have a 5-2 vote.
Okay, thank you. So now the motion on the motion for us to consider is whether we should table the topic to Thursday. We have a request to table this topic to Thursday. Any other comments? Director Potacek?
Again, a question. What are we going to know Thursday that we don't know now? I respect
Good question.
the asking, the inquiry, the
Mhm.
wanting to know, but I'm just very curious in a practical matter, what are we going to know Thursday that we don't know tonight?
Good question. Director Pearson?
And I think, Mike, I appreciate that. I think what Kathy has said, and I think she'll have more information if we talk about the superintendent hiring process, but I think she can lay out for us the process of what will happen in order to fill that principal position at Afton Lakeland. If I'm correct, Kathy.
Correct.
Any other thoughts? Director Burns?
Just another, Chair Stivlin, you had mentioned another bit of information that we might get between now and Thursday, which is any input, any feedback on this.
Whether we table to Thursday or not, I'm sure we'll be getting some feedback. So that's it, but that is a good point. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'm having internet issues. Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? Okay, so we're going to vote on the motion to table this topic until Thursday. Everybody ready? Sherry, can we do a roll call, please?
Director Burns,
Yes.
Director Pearson,
Yes.
Director Pelletier,
Yes.
Director Potacik,
Yes.
Director Reilly,
No.
Director Weisberg,
No.
Chair Stivland.
No.
You have a 4-3 vote.
Okay, so we now have a motion that is going to be added to the agenda for Thursday. That means that we are not going to go through a process of establishing a contract yet. We will be discussing this again Thursday at our regular board business meeting. And I don't think I need to read the motion. I'm not sure that we need to have a vote on the motion. We're tabling it. So we will vote on this motion as it was read earlier on Thursday. Is that all clear? Okay. All right. So moving on, I don't have a lot of information, but I would like to ask some questions. The next piece of this is what we would like to see in the process for selecting the permanent superintendent position. So I've begun doing some research on different companies that will that we can hire to work with us, and they can facilitate a process from beginning to end. And they all have, you know, their own culture and their own sort of style of working, and they all have different, obviously different things that we might want to look at. So the question I have is, how would you like this process to go? I have 6 different companies now that I have been in contact just initially asking for information. What kinds of information would you like to have? Would you like me to provide all of that to you all at once, and then we can have a meeting where we narrow them down to say 3? Or would you like to have have them all come and do a presentation? You know, what would you like for this process to look like? So I'm just going to open it up to comments. Director Weisberg?
Is this something that we would get like RFPs for, or is that what you're talking about? Like you already have enough information that would maybe be in an RFP that we could review? I don't know if that.
So I just did some initial inquiries. You know, a lot of the companies have like a way to ask questions or contact us. And so I did that. A couple of them went ahead and sent a proposal for actually working with us. So that isn't the case with all of them. It's sort of different with each company, but yeah, I could request a proposal from each of these companies if we want, and then we could consider all of them. If there are others besides the 6 that I have here, you know, that you all have heard of or have gotten recommendations from other people, we can certainly add that. I mean, you know, we're all in the same boat. I think we, you know, haven't really done this before. And so I want to give the board the opportunity to weigh in on what you think the process should look like.
Just a quick follow-up. I think it makes sense to just have requests for proposals from companies and then have the board choose like we do other contractors.
Okay. So I would collect the proposals and provide them to everybody all at once, and then we could have that on an agenda and talk about it. Is that what you're thinking? Okay, Director Potacik?
Yes. Again, I hate to bring up my age, but I have been here when we've had groups come in and give a presentation. They are very different. And the services that provide, the process, which Tina talked about earlier, the process can vary a great deal. And I think the advantage of having groups come in and say you have 6 or 5, I don't think you want it too big, but I think that's a great opportunity for you to see what's out there and what kinds of things that they do. And particularly, let's face it, our prior discussion was part of that And some of them will do precisely what Jen talked about is, what are you looking for in a superintendent? And if you're not there, they help you get there. So even some kind of work session where they talk about that.
Okay. Director Pearson?
I would be interested in having them come in and share with us what they have offered, whether that's something that we narrow them down. Maybe that's wise to narrow down to 3 as a board and then have them come in and make a proposal to us. I think part of the question is, are we going for a 1 year? That I think is Kathy's recommendation and what's probably going to be best for us as a district. So we have time to really vet this process and make sure that it's who we really feel the most comfortable with. I think last time we did the search by ourselves because our interim superintendent at the time had said, you know, not all search firms give you all of the applicants. They kind of choose who they want to give you. And so I think that's part of the conversation that we need to have with them is, who are they bringing us? How do we know that we're getting the best candidates and all of that? So I would support doing something like we did when we hired Cunningham, where we bring them in and they share with us what their process is, how they work with us, how they help ensure that we're getting the best candidate possible.
Director Burns?
And
Director
to
Burns?
that point, Director Pearson, I'd be very curious with the RFPs if we would be able to supplement, for example, if we'd be able to post and have people send in their application materials separate and apart from the search firm. It'd be interesting to see if that'd be allowed. But I'd like to learn that, because that could provide a little bit broader base.
Director Pelletier?
Agree with all the comments that were just made. I just wanted to add this just for consideration, maybe on a more of a macro level, but I was in a conversation with a resident today and she asked me what I want to see in a superintendent. And I was completely unable to answer the question. And I'm wondering, I answered it with this. I answered with, I think we need to involve our public, our community, and ask our community what they want to see in our next superintendent. I think our previous superintendent was hired because of her skill in teaching and learning, which she clearly has displayed. And I think I would love to hear actually from the public on what kinds of things they want to see. I don't know if that's in the form of another survey, something like that, what that is, but the reason I couldn't answer the question is because I want to hear from the community on that. So in some capacity, I'd love to address that.
That's a really good point. And just the basic amount of information I have received so far, a lot of the companies do involve the community on some level. And it also depends on the community, because sometimes it's really small community. And so what that looks like is really different than a community like ours where it's really big. So they work with the, we would be the client. So they work with the client to define what we want in the process and how we would like to have the community involved. So I think that's a really, really good point. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is I'll continue to get information, full proposals from all the companies, share them with the board, perhaps at a work session, and then we can decide, maybe pick our top 3 at that point, and then maybe have them come in for a presentation and narrow it down to 1 or something like that. Does that sound pretty good? Director Pearson?
I think also for Kathy's sake, we need to talk about, at least reach some kind of consensus about the period of time that we're looking at trying to hire, because that's going to alter what she brings to us on Thursday as far as process. And I think I've made clear my part that I think it probably is best to get the best candidate if we have an interim for 1 year.
Yeah.
Director Potacek?
Yeah, I'm not sure Kathy's still hooked up, but I think what you could do, and there are two different ways that it would seem to me like you could do this. One is you could make the interim's going to last a year regardless. I think what also happens too is in this, I know there's going to be a little blood on this one that's going to come. Are you going to have that process done first semester or second semester? Because generally what happens, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, candidates will apply for the superintendent position. That part is not generally revealed, that bigger pool. When it gets down to finalists, that is. Because what is hard for superintendent candidates sometimes, if they're already in a district and they go out and apply and they don't get the job, then the people back home on the ranch are scratching their head. But my point is that bigger pool, I think, is much more comfortable if that part is a little more anonymous. And then the finalists, whatever number is agreed to, that part is more public. But regardless of when you do that, you could say they don't come till the school year is over, whether you make that July 1 of next year or whatever. That might be a little smoother.
Just for clarity, once the board selects candidate that they are going to interview, they are considered a finalist and their names are public.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Director Burns?
Just to say that I would agree with Director Potacek that that in order to have it be a kind of a starting date of July 1 of 2021, that doesn't mean that you have to wait till May to make the hire, but the starting date is July 1.
That's right. Yeah. Director Pearson?
Thank you. And I think probably it makes sense to maybe kick it off right away in January so we get the best pool of those who are thinking about making a change. But if we can get all of this work done in the meantime, choosing our company and getting everything in really good order, then I think we'll be in a good place to get a good candidate.
Sorry, it's kind of noisy here, so I keep muting myself. Any other comments? So I guess I'm in favor of actually going ahead with the process now rather than waiting. So I guess what I'm hearing is we're going to go ahead and work through the RFP process and try to select a company and all of that. Is that clear? Am I understanding that right? Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions about this? Okay.
Just,
Director Pelletier?
sorry, just really quick. So is there going to be a follow-up of defining the parameters of the process and what the process is going to look like? Is this going to be something that is written up by someone, perhaps Kathy, or I don't know. So the public, so we have that as well as the public can easily find out what we're going to be doing.
Okay, I'm not sure. Director Pearson?
Yeah, thank you. I would say we know our next step is to go out for RFPs. I think the process then is partly determined by whomever we pick to run the process for us. And hopefully, that would include going out to the community and doing everything else that we think is right. So I think right now we know next steps are to continue with this process and bring the RFPs to the board and then choose somebody. And then I think we can lay out a process more clearly then when we know who we're going with and how they work.
Okay, so with that, I have a follow-up question. Kathy, can you just help with this as we go out for RFPs? Is there some sort of parameter that, like a pricing or, ranges or timeline or, anything like that as we go? I mean, I'm completely fine with going out for RFPs, but what is in the RFP? Just what you guys do as a firm? Is that literally what this is? I'm just to make sure.
Hang on a second. Would this be more of a quote than an RFP? I just want to make that part clear.
I would say it's a request for proposals. It's not a bid process. So you can request that the companies submit proposals for what kind of services they would provide. And then you take those proposals and decide if they are what you want. And if you don't, let's say there's one of them that you prefer as a base, but you want to change the process to add some component, or you want more community meetings, or you want more meetings with the board, or those kinds of things, then you could work with that company to say, this is what we want. So can you do the process the way we want to it? The other way you could do it is do a meeting with the board to say, what is it that we as a board want in this process? And then you put out the request for proposals to say, we want somebody to give us information on what you would do for a process if we want X, Y, and Z to happen. So you can do it either way. If you want to start with the conversation of yourselves and talk about what you want out of that process, it would actually probably be helpful for them as they're submitting proposals to know that.
Can I interject in that then? With that, thank you. That's kind of what I was trying to get to and look for, Kathy. So for me, I really am interested in whatever company presents to us. I really would like to know how they plan to engage with the community. That's kind of important to me. So if we're going to be discussing what's important to whomever, that is a biggie for me.
Awesome. Director Weisberg, and then we'll go to Patrick.
I was just going to say that I believe that's something that could be put in an RFP. How do you involve the community in this process? So maybe, I don't know if we need to have like a special work session, but maybe if we want to submit questions that these are questions we would like to ask the company that's going to help us find a superintendent. And that could be one of the questions. And then if there are, obviously other factors come into that too, and people could submit questions and the RFP could be developed from those questions.
Mm-hmm. Director Patrick?
I think one of the advantages of having them come in and make presentations is you'll get a better idea of what it is. There are things, this old cliche is used of what you know or what you want to know, but then there are some of those things that you don't know what you don't know. And that's the advantage of having the presentations come in. All of these companies most likely are going to contain retired superintendents. This is what they choose to do for X number of years. Also, what's very, very important is each of those firms also sometimes, pardon the metaphor, have a stable of candidates that they kind of fall onto. And so, but they will include that in their standard presentations. But like Kathy said, one is there'll be some variance. You'll like certain people more than you like other people. Cost can become a factor. And then also, most companies are going to have flexibility. What kind of things are you looking for? And after you hear one or two of those presentations, I think you'll have a better idea of what you want. For example, community involvement, what kind of community involvement, how, and they'll do that. But part of that work session will come up with, I think almost all these companies will do, is whoever you select, they're going to have a work session with the board and help you get at what kind of a person or candidate you're looking for.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. These are all really good ideas. Would it be good for me to try to combine all of these thoughts onto some kind of a statement and send it out to all of you so that we have some clarification. And maybe if you want me to add anything into the requests, I can add those questions and comments into the request. So we go forward. Would that be helpful? I don't know that we need to have a work session first. So that's not super clear. I think if we just get the information from the companies, then we have what they offer and we can have a work session and talk about some of those details. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I'm seeing thumbs up. So that seems like a good plan. All right. I think Director Potachik?
Yeah, it seems to me by the kind of discussion you're having, this should go to the personnel committee with the original group of 6 or whatever proposals. And then whether you're going to have presentations of all 6 or you're going to slim it down to 3 or 4 or something like that.
That's a good suggestion. Awesome. Director Pearson?
Thank you. I'd like to hear from others on that. I think this is a big enough thing that, is everybody comfortable with personnel whittles it down to 3 or 4 and then they present to the board, or do we want to hear from everybody as a full board? Because there may be others, if other board members have heard of other firms, or, maybe that's the next question. Maybe first we just go out for RFPs and see how many we get back, and then we decide from there. But I think to hear from others, whether they would support that process.
Either way, I think we need a work session as a board so that we can all weigh in on what we want and what we hope to see out of the process and everything. And I think we can explore the role of the personnel committee. I think there definitely is a role there, and I'm not exactly sure what it would be, but I definitely think that this is something all of us should be able to weigh in on, at various points, obviously. Did you have something, Director Pelletier?
Yeah, just Shelley, thanks for the question. And I'm in agreement that I think this is big enough where it should be a full board discussion.
Yeah. Anything else on this before we go, Director Burns?
Oh, just to kind of second that I think that what we can do first is to have a work session once the proposals are in, and at that work session we can come to an understanding of how we want to go from there.
That sounds great. That sounds good. Okay, I think I have a little bit of direction here. I have enough clarification, and so then I think I would like to move on to the next part of our agenda tonight, which is to talk about the process for the the selection of an assistant superintendent. This process has been laid out quite differently than what we have talked about already with the superintendent. And so I think I'm going to turn it over to Director Reilly and Director Moen. I'm not sure who's going to go first to be able to share what that process is going to look like. And
that's fine. I can start.
We will need a vote to support to approve the process tonight to be able to go forward. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Right. So considering that our superintendent will be leaving in the near future, I thought it made sense that this position would have been handled through a slightly different process. So I went to work with Kathy, and I think she conferred quite a bit with Maggie a little bit to kind of outline this. The process is actually pretty similar to what Kathy normally does, except the first part, which the board reviews and narrows the candidates down to their top 8 out of the 16 candidates we received. And what we've kind of decided was, you received your candidate information, and I'm hopefully reviewed all the applications, and then you are to rank them from 1 to 8, 1 being your first choice. And then from there, Kathy, we will, after the meeting tonight, we will call Kathy and let her know what our choices are, and she will combine all of those rankings and come out with the top 3 to 5. I think I don't know if that's a flexible number or if that's something we need to decide tonight, Kathy. And then after, yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's up to the board.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes when you get the rank orders, it kind of plays out that there's a clear line, but if you are saying that you want a specific number, I'll just make sure that we take those rankings and get to that number.
Okay. And then after we call Kathy with that information and she has our top 3 to 5, however we decide that tonight, she will invite them to be part of an interview process in a committee that she kind of pulled together with various people throughout the district. And then we have the interview committee includes one board member, which was myself. That was, I think, was decided in personnel, being that the board voted to involve the personnel committee a couple meetings ago. The interview committee will rank those candidates by ballot as well. And it'll be anonymous, so nobody's name will be attached to anything. And then after all of those are collected, reference checks will be done by Kathy and HR on the top 3 committee ranked candidates. And those candidates, all of that information will then be provided to the full board. And then we will select the final candidate at a board meeting. So, and that's kind of the gist of it. Anything to add to that, Kathy?
The only piece that I would add that we had built into our process the first time around that I would encourage us to do is we usually on our top administrative positions have an outside firm that does another, it's about an hour and a half long interview that kind of weighs excellence in a leadership and administration and gives us feedback from another perspective that we usually use as another piece of info as we narrow the candidates down. So all of that information will be brought together then to provide you information to make a decision.
And this is going to be done at a regular board meeting or a special meeting? Or if we take care of and have the superintendent position hired, there is no super big urgency then to do a special meeting, right?
I believe so. The one question that I would have for you is if you have a superintendent that you have made a decision to put in place, it would make sense for that superintendent then to have a large weigh-in on who that candidate is or that final person that is selected and brought to the board. So we might want to, given tonight's discussion, just tweak that process slightly to have that person be in a piece of the decision making.
Director Weisberg?
Kathy, are you saying have that person on the committee? Do you know who's on the committee yet?
Well, we had 2 committees that were all set to go that we just put on hold. Mm-hmm. So my intent would be to go back to those committees. There's a first round committee and a second round committee, and use those 2 committees to do this process again. What I would suggest is that when all of the data comes together, with the reference checks and the rank order from the committee and all of the other screening, is that what I don't know is, does the board want all the 3 finalists and the information, or do you want all that kind of synthesized and one person recommended? And if that's the case, then I would be looking to the superintendent who's going to be overseeing that position as helping to decide who that finalist that would be recommended to you to take action. That piece is completely up to you how you want it handled.
I think I
Dr. Burns,
personally
did you have
would.
a question?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Did you have something, Director Burns?
Oh, I guess I was just, if we have just an interim superintendent while this is taking place, I would assume that we want to move as quickly as we can with the hiring of the assistant superintendent. And so I think, or I'm just asking maybe, if we go through with this process and the committees who have been put in place already, have a role in that, would that not be sufficient to then come up with at least one or two or three candidates?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Director Reilly, did you have something?
No, it will kind of was about with Mark, what similar to what Mark had said. I guess I would appreciate having the top three candidates formalized or all of the information sent to the board. The position right now that we're having with the superintendent interim is a temporary position. And so the board will be the one choosing, making the final decision on the full-time permanent superintendent. So I think, knowing that we would put our energy and thoughts into that, it would be probably something similar with the assistant superintendent.
We'll just bring the information on the top three back to the board.
That's what I would
That sounds
prefer.
good.
I'm interested in anybody else's feedback, though.
We'll go to Director Potacek.
I'll go to Jen first.
Okay, Director Peltier.
I'm in agreement with Director Reilly on her previous statement. And Kathy, or maybe you had already stated this, we had 8 candidates lined up, and what are we doing courtesy wise for those? Are all of those candidates coming back, or what happened there? Where is this now?
We were actually had not called the candidates to invite them in yet. Everything was in place, the process and the timelines, but we had not actually made the contact with the candidates yet. So I did send out an email to the candidates when we kind of delayed and re-looked at the process, that we were re-looking at it and our timelines, and that I would keep in touch with them as we had more information. So they are aware that you're working on the process.
Director Potacek.
Just want to make sure I understand the steps and the public ends of steps. I think the good news for the public and for us is that we had 16 candidates. So we had a nice pool. Now, what board members are going to do is they're going to give Kathy information individually on their top 8 in rank order. Then your committees are going to go from how many out of that numbers? Because I'm presuming it's probably going to be greater than 8, but what are the committees? Are they going to whittle it down to 3? Is that the whole idea?
Well, if you start out with 5 candidates, for example, in the first round, if we have 3 to 5, depending on where that is, then you're going to have you'll have the rank order of the committee of where they ranked each of those candidates to use as you decide. And then I guess I don't know how many you whittle it down, because again, sometimes there's a very clear line between these people were not, these people are very clear top and these are far away. So then you can kind of decide where you want that breaking line to be.
So that would go back to what Tina said, 3 or 5, depending what the breaks were.
Right.
And then that final number would go to the board. Is that the idea?
The committee will rank them as well. And then all of that information after they rank will go to the board for the board to make a decision.
Okay, and one last little end, and I think Mark talked to that, and I would like to see it too. If we have an interim superintendent at that point, I would appreciate is an information part of that, what he or she's position on the candidates were. So if they said, I think that would be a great team for that time period or whatever. That's a little trickier. But at the same time, I think that's out of respect to the superintendent. And I think it's good to hear their perspective. And it can be written, it doesn't,
Yeah, that sounds great. Director Weisberg? Director Weisberg? Sorry, Director Weisberg?
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing, our 8 go to Kathy today, and that's phone call or email? 'Cause-
By phone call.
Okay, and then based on, I mean, assuming some people have the same people, are you saying 3 to 5 then would get interviewed, or will the top 8, whichever the 8 are, get interviewed? Then it goes to committee. I guess that's my question. How many interviews we'll have?
What I would foresee is you probably want to narrow it down to the top 5 so that you have a good pool of candidates to interview, at least 4 to 5. And then once that interview process is done, it would get narrowed down to a second round. And that would probably be 2 to 3 people that come in the second round. And then that information and the rankings and the recommendation out of that committee with all of the information together would come back to the full board as a recommendation for those top candidates. If I'm understanding Tina, all of the top candidates interviewed in round 2.
So just to clarify, initially we only had 1 round and now we're adding a second round?
Our first process had 2 rounds.
Right, I think it changed in the middle of our speaking because of time constraints and timelines. And so I thought it was written into the process that the board received was 1 round. So now we'll go back and do 2 rounds.
Okay, so I'm fine with whatever you guys decide you want. In talking with Sarah, I guess I was thinking that I was going to go back and kind of go to the process. So what I will do, whichever
Okay.
way you want it to be. I think one of the concerns was that we had invited 2 large groups of people to be a part of the process. And so to now say half of you, we aren't going to invite you to be a part anymore was a concern. So I'm totally open to do it whichever way you prefer.
So my apologies because Sarah kind of stepped in and took over at that point. So I'll let her continue. Thank you.
Director Pearson?
Thank you. Can somebody, I don't know who knows the answer to it, but originally the process was going to interview 8. Why wouldn't we start with 8 again, just to have a bigger pool?
We can do 8. 8 was a lot, and so what we were doing in the first process was 8 people for shorter interviews so that we could kind of narrow those 8 down to 2 or 3. So we can go back and do that process that way if you prefer. If you want just 1 round, then it's better to have a smaller pool so we can have more time. So we have time to ask more questions in 1 session.
So
Go ahead, Director Pearson.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'd rather do more to start. I'd rather get closer to 8 because sometimes we've seen that what shows on paper isn't always who they are in person. I'd rather do more in person where the committee can talk with them face to face and then whittle that down to a smaller number.
Director Burns?
I would agree with Director Pearson that I think that sometimes it can be very difficult to ascertain what the candidate is really like on paper, and to be able to have, ideally 8 candidates would then give our interview committees some initial feedback on that 8, and they can whittle it down and we go from there. But I would agree to go with 8.
Yeah, and I would just like to say too that, this assistant superintendent position process, this is not an interim process. This is the permanent assistant superintendent that we're looking for. And so we do want to make sure we're being really careful and thoughtful and comprehensive with the process, and take the time that we need to get the right person. And it just in sort of commentary with some of the stuff that was said earlier about whether we have 1 set of interviews or 2, I just was having a conversation with Kathy and knew that initially the process included 2 sets of interviews, and there were a lot of people involved who were wanting to be a part of the process. And I just made the comment that I didn't want to leave anybody out of the process if people had been signed up to be a part of it. I thought that they should have a chance to be a part of those interviews. So I just didn't want to have any hurt feelings or anything like that. So that was all it was. I think there's a lot of flexibility in how we do this. We just want to make sure we end up with the right candidate, and anybody who wants to be a part of the process should have a chance. So that's all about that. Any other comments? Any other questions about the process itself? Because we do need to have a motion tonight to approve the process. Director Burns?
Thank you. Just two questions, I think, to Kathy. The first is the interview committee. What is that comprised of? Who, not names, but what types of individuals are comprised those committees?
The original committees that I had put together had principals from all levels. So we had an elementary, actually I had 2 elementaries, a secondary and a high school principal. I had invited 2 students, actually our student board members from the previous school year. I had invited to be a part of that process. I had parents, a parent in each of the rounds. And then I also had requested that Josiah Hill, our SCEA teacher president, be a part of that. And then I had also in different places in the committees had a special ed teacher and an elementary teacher and a specialist. And so different areas of the teaching staff also covered in that, just to try to make sure we were getting perspectives of all. Obviously I can't get all of them, but that covered a lot of them, and a lot of the community role, the parent role, the staff role, and the buildings were almost all covered. So I was just trying to make sure we had all the perspectives represented without having the entire district at the interview table.
That sounds good. Thank you. Director Weisberg?
Or Kathy, did you say you had the current student representatives, or what did you say?
I had requested the student representatives from the board last year who have experience working with the board and the administration, and so that we would have them at the table.
Director Potacek?
Kathy, are there any directors on there, like curriculum?
Yeah, I apologize. I had, we had district level coordinators, the LNI, some of the LNI coordinators, and then all of the directors were split into 2, and half of them were in one round and half in the other. So each round had about 13 or 14 people on the interview team for the process.
Director Weisberg?
So the list that we got of the 8 candidates, that was the recommendation of both committees that you've just described?
No, those were the candidates that were initially selected to do when we were going to do the first round of interviews with the process that was starting.
So, right, but those are the only people that were selected, correct?
Correct.
From the committee that you just described?
No, those were selected. Denise went through screened applicants and then selected the top 8 that she was going to invite for interviews.
So I think those were just sent to us as a reference, that those were the ones who had, been screened earlier.
Correct.
For the process, right?
But those were just screened by Denise, you said, not the committee?
Correct. No, the committee had not met any of the candidates yet.
Thank you.
Director Pelletier?
Yeah, Kathy, are you, in what regard are you addressing or inviting to the table our communities of color? How intentional are we being about giving our communities of color a seat at the table throughout this process?
Yeah, we had done some work to make sure we had our communities of color represented.
Any other questions? Does everybody understand the process? Director Pearson?
Thank you. I think maybe it would be best, Kathy, if you have a good enough understanding of what's been discussed to say what you understand, so that we know that everybody's on the same page.
So maybe we can have you, explain each step, and then we'll have a motion. I'll ask for a motion to approve the process as explained by Director Moen.
Okay. And then Tina, if I get to the end and I don't have it the way you want it, just let me know so I make sure we have what you're thinking. So the plan is for you to have reviewed the candidates that you received, the application materials, which I'm going to ask that you send back to me after we get through with this process. You call me tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, give me your top 8 candidates in rank order so that I know who would be your number 1 candidate, and then 1 through 8. And then I will use that information to narrow down the candidates that will be, well, actually, if we're going to do all 8, we will invite all 8 of those individuals, which now that if we're going to do all 8, then I don't know that we need to even do the ranking, because if we're going to bring them all in, I don't know that that's necessary, so we can come back to that. We will interview all 8 candidates in a first round of interview with a full interview team, who will then narrow it down to, I'll say 3 to 5 for round 2, given that we're doing all 8. We will do a second round of interviews. That committee then will, by a secret ballot, rank their candidates, depending on the number of candidates, from 1 to 3 or 5, depending on what that is. And then I will use that information to call references on the top 3 of those candidates that are ranked by the committee. We will also use those, unless you tell me you do not want me to do the piece, to have the outside firm that we usually have do a very in-depth process specific to administrator excellence, have that process done. And then that will all be brought to you on the top 3, unless you tell me differently, for you to be able to determine who your top candidate is. The one thing I want us to be very careful of is what we talk about the candidates at the table. So I when we get to that point, I will want to work with someone to say, how and what information do you want provided, so that we are very respectful and consider private data as we get to the, the final discussion.
Director Pearson?
Thank you. I think, Kathy, to your question about ranking, I think,
No, Director Pearson?
yeah, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I think, Kathy, to your question of ranking, I think we still would want to rank, if I'm correct, because we're not going to land on the same people, right?
True. Yep, you're right. I apologize, because you have all 16. So yep,
Right.
I still will need your top 8.
Okay, thank you. I think Director Stivland is frozen. So I think Director Burns, did you have something?
Any other questions?
No, it was the same as what you had asked, Shelley. So
Okay.
no different.
Lost our chair.
Yeah. So does anybody else have any questions?
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Can I make a motion to implement the recommended assistant superintendent hiring process as presented by administration?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There you are.
Hi.
I just had a quick question.
Go ahead, Director Weisberg.
I didn't know if you were all the way back with us or not. So
Yeah.
the committee, the different rounds that it's going to go through, are there 2 separate committees, or is it one committee that's going to do both rounds?
There are 2 separate committees.
Mhm.
However, there are a couple people that for consistency purposes, that I will have follow the process through both rounds. But like the teacher roles, for example, will be different people in the first round than they are in the second round, just for the option to get extra perspectives at the table and involved in the process.
And will the board member that's on the committee be on both committees?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a, okay, go ahead.
Do we have the ability to submit potential questions that the committees could ask?
So yes, I did not move forward with putting the final pieces together for this till I made sure that you kind of had a plan that all worked for everybody. So I will be going full bore trying to get the process all pulled together and everything set up again. I sent you the criteria that we collected from different people with perspectives and feedback that will kind of drive the questions. But if there's things that you want me to make sure get included, yes, please send those to me.
Okay, that sounds great. Any other questions? Comments? Are we ready to vote? All right, Sherry,
Yes.
can we do a roll call vote?
Director Burns,
Yes.
Director Pearson,
Yes.
Director Pelletier,
Yes.
Director Potacik,
Yes.
Director Reilly,
Yes.
Director Weisberg,
Yes.
Chair Stivland.
Yes,
You have a unanimous vote.
awesome. Thank you very much. And I just want to say I appreciate all the work that was put into this process from both Kathy Moen and Tina Reilly. It's been
And
a
Sherry.
very well thought out
Mhm.
plan, and and I'm really excited. Having had a chance to look at some of the candidates, I'm very excited about the pool of people and the potential for our future leader for our district. So we'll, Director Weisberg.
Kathy, can you email us your phone number?
Sure.
I wrote myself a note for that and I forgot to ask it.
Yes.
Thank you for all your help, Kat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I think that we are finished with our topics for tonight. And so without further ado, I would like to adjourn the meeting. Everybody okay with that? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.